Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast for intermediate to advanced level English learners. Why is Ireland divided? For just over 100 years, the Emerald Isle has been split between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom. The history of Ireland is complicated, fascinating, and sometimes controversial. Today, I want to talk about how Ireland became connected with the United Kingdom, discuss why Northern Ireland exists, and talk about the possibility of a future united Ireland. You can find the full transcript of today's episode over on the Thinking in English blog. Go over to my Instagram page, Thinking in English Podcast, for more content, and leave a like, rating, or review wherever you are listening right now. Here is today's vocabulary list. As always, the written list will be available in the description of the podcast and also on my blog, thinkinginenglish.blog. Be blessed with something. Be blessed with something. To be lucky in having a particular thing. For example, she is blessed with great intelligence. Settler. Settler. A settler is a person who arrives in a new place in order to live there and use the land. As in, the first settlers on that island came from Africa. Bronze Age. Bronze Age. The time in the past when tools were made of bronze, a metal made of copper and tin, and before iron was discovered. For example, it is thought that Stonehenge was constructed during the Bronze Age. Clan. Clan. A group of families who originally came from the same family and have the same name. As in, the O'Brien clan was one of the most powerful clans in Ireland. Anglo. Anglo. Relating to England or the UK. For example, Anglo-Saxons ruled England until the year 1066. To emigrate. To emigrate. To leave a country permanently and go to live in another one. For instance, millions of Germans emigrated to the Americas in the 19th century. Uprising. Uprising. An act of opposition, sometimes using violence, by many people in one area of a country against those who are in power. For example, there was a popular uprising in the capital city. Unionist. Unionist. A person who supports Northern Ireland remaining part of the United Kingdom. For example, the deal has been opposed by unionist politicians. Ireland and the Irish people have a rich history and culture that has spread across the globe. From the deliciously dark Guinness beer sold globally in pubs and bars, to the massive St. Patrick's Day celebrations that turn entire cities green, Ireland has had a major international influence. But did you know that Ireland is not actually one single country? Ireland is an island divided between two countries. The majority of the island forms the independent and sovereign nation known in English as the Republic of Ireland, while the northeast of the island is known as Northern Ireland and forms part of the United Kingdom. 101 years ago, the Emerald Isle was divided into two separate areas, with separate governments and separate leaders. But why? Today, I want to look at the history of Ireland, talk about how the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland came into existence, and discuss what the future may hold for the country, all while improving our English vocabulary. I'm sure most of you have heard of Ireland before, but if you haven't, I'll just give a short introduction to the island's location. In fact, before I do that, I should make a note on pronunciation. You are going to hear me say Ireland and island hundreds of times in this episode. Ireland refers to the name of the island. The pronunciation of these two words is similar but slightly different. The country, the name, is Ireland, has 3 syllables. Ireland, Ireland. While Ireland, the geography, the Britain is an island, Australia is an island, only has 2 syllables. Island. So listen carefully so you know if I'm saying Ireland or island. So, the island of Ireland is located at the westernmost edge of Europe. The west coast of Ireland faces the enormous Atlantic Ocean, while the east coast faces the island of Britain and modern countries Scotland, Wales, and now England. You might have noticed that I described Ireland as the Emerald Isle earlier in this episode. But why did I do that? Well, due to Ireland's location to the Atlantic, it is blessed with abundant rain. This rain has helped Ireland's nature and environment to flourish. The island is covered with beautiful fields of bright green grass, and as emeralds are bright green, Ireland has been given the nickname the Emerald Isle. Compared to other parts of Europe, humans didn't reach Ireland until relatively late. Archaeologists tend to believe that the first settlers were hunter-fisher peoples who arrived around 10,000 years ago. Farming is believed to have begun on the island between 4000 and 3000 BC, and over the following millennia, the early Irish peoples developed burial traditions, pottery, and other forms of culture. Interestingly, there are clear differences within the culture of Bronze Age Ireland, some of these differences that continue until today. The western half of Ireland showed a lot of similarity with the tombs and pottery of the Brittany region of modern France, while East Ireland had a culture that was influenced more by northern Europeans, who likely reached the country through Britain. During this Bronze Age period, Irish metal was exported into Britain and the rest of Europe. Today, Ireland is known as a Celtic nation. Ireland, Scotland, and Wales are perhaps the most famous and well-known Celtic countries, with Ireland and Wales teaching their own Celtic languages at schools alongside English. But did you know that there are also other Celtic nations which still exist to some extent today? Although not countries, the Isle of Man, Cornwall, which is the most southwestern part of England, and Brittany, a region in France, all have a Celtic identity and their own Celtic languages. While all of these languages are in the same family, Irish, Scottish Gaelic, and Manx are related, while Welsh, Breton from Brittany, and Cornish from Cornwall are related. The other region that is often included as Celtic is Galicia or Galicia in northern Spain. But unlike the other 6 countries and regions, they no longer speak a Celtic language in Spain. The Celtic people did not originate in the western part of Europe. It is believed that they have their origins in Central or Eastern Europe around 3,000 years ago, and their culture once spread across the whole of the European continent. The Celts arrived in Ireland around 300 BC from Britain or mainland Europe, and have had a massive influence on Irish history. Many of Ireland's most famous stories, myths, and legends come from the Celtic period, and Ireland's official language, Irish, is a Celtic language. Early Ireland was not a united country. Instead, the island was divided into different independent kingdoms, or clans, and each clan had its own leader or king. In fact, there was no king or leader of all Ireland until around 1000 years ago. Christian missionaries, including the world famous St. Patrick, arrived in Ireland in the early 5th century, and Christianity had become the dominant religion by the year 600. Around this time, Ireland was split into 5 regions: Ulster, Meath, Leinster, Munster, and Connaught. These regions still play a major role in Irish society today. During the time when the Romans controlled Britain, a lot was written about Irish raiders. The Irish raided settlements across the west of Britain, stealing things, and eventually started their own settlements. In fact, Irish raiders were known to kidnap people, and they kidnapped St. Patrick. That's how St. Patrick ended up in Ireland originally. These Irish raiders were given the name Scoti, and their most famous settlement was in the Argyll region of modern day Scotland. While this kingdom was once controlled by the Irish kings, it eventually became independent from Ireland and defeated the kingdom of the Picts in Scotland, and then gave its name to the whole of northern Britain, Scotland. So that's right, modern Scotland was settled and conquered by the Celtic Irish, and they gave their name, Scoti, to the land, which we still have today. Norsemen were first recorded in Ireland around the year 795. The Norsemen is another word for Vikings. And the Vikings seized the ports of Anagassan and Dublin in 838. And then they continued invasions into the north of Ireland. After taking other towns, including Waterford and Limerick, the Vikings of Dublin gradually became traders rather than raiders. And they were finally defeated by the High King Brian Boru at the Battle of Clontarf in 1014. From the 12th century onwards, Ireland became a point of interest for the Norman rulers of England. The Normans, originally from France, had conquered Britain a century earlier, and King Henry II decided to expand his kingdom by invading Ireland in the year 1171. The Irish kings were forced to accept Henry's supremacy. Henry received support from the Catholic Church, recognizing his control of Ireland, and the Anglo-Normans were given land in Ireland. English law was introduced in Ireland by King John in the 13th century, and a parliament was established that resembled the English parliament of the time. Importantly, the native Irish were unrepresented politically. The new laws and the new parliament were just for the Anglo-Norman settlers. The Normans built castles and increased the amount of farming in Ireland, and the country eventually became divided between the new Anglo-Irish rulers and the native Irish population. Many years later, King Henry VIII created the Church of England in 1534 and separated England from the Catholic Church in Rome, and after this made the Irish Parliament declare him as King of all Ireland in 1541. England then adopted a policy known as plantation. Thousands of English and Scottish Protestants were sent to Ireland. The most successful plantation was in the region of Ulster in northeast Ireland, and this is an important point you should remember later. So new laws were introduced in Ireland, introducing harsh punishments and restrictions on the native Catholic population. There was now a division between the Protestant English and the Catholic Irish on the island of Ireland. For example, Catholics were banned from owning expensive land, not allowed to enter education or certain professions, and were forced to swear allegiance to the Protestant Church rather than the Catholic Church. The result was that by 1778, only 5% of land in Ireland was owned by Catholics. In 1791, an organization called the United Irishmen, inspired by the French Revolution, attempted to bring all Irish people together and reduce the British control over Ireland. The rebellion eventually failed, and in 1801 the Act of Union was passed in London, which united Ireland politically with Britain. Ireland was now officially part of the United Kingdom for the first time in its history. The most important food in Ireland during the 19th century was the potato. A disease known as blight struck Irish potato crops in 1845, 1846, and 1847, destroying almost the entire supply of potatoes. Irish people now had no food, and they began to starve to death. While thousands of Irish were starving, the British government forced Ireland to send all of their dairy, meat, and wheat products to Britain, instead of using them for food for the Irish people. The potato famine was one of the greatest disasters of the 19th century. 2 million Irish people died or emigrated from Ireland, and today the population of Ireland is still lower than pre-famine levels. Ireland is now known as a country of emigration. Millions of Irish people live across the world, especially in the US. But this trend to emigrate was started by the potato famine. Home rule is the idea that a region can control itself and make its own rules, even while being part of a larger country. Places like Greenland and the Faroe Islands have this kind of relationship with Denmark. A Home Rule Bill was passed by the British Parliament in 1912 to give Ireland some more self-control. However, it never became a law, as World War I began in 1914. Many Irish nationalists joined the British Army, and even though they hated Britain, they believed that if Ireland helped Britain win the war, they would be rewarded with more independence. However, a few Irish nationalists did not trust the British, and began one of the most important events in Irish history, the Easter Rising. On Easter Monday in 1916, two groups of Irish rebels seized key locations in Dublin. They declared that a new country was going to be formed, and battles raged across the city, resulting in the loss of life. The rising was actually unpopular with the majority of Irish. As I said, most Irish people wanted to support Britain with the hope that they would be rewarded after the war. And the rebels eventually surrendered a week after the uprising. Public opinion changed, however, after the British executed almost every single person involved in the rebellion. The Irish nationalist Sinn Féin party won a majority of Ireland's seats in the British Parliament in 1918, and in January 1919, they declared Ireland to be independent. The Irish War of Independence was fought against the British from 1919 until 1921. Eventually, they signed a peace treaty. Ireland was given independence and known as the Irish Free State. But not all of Ireland was to be independent. Out of the 32 counties of Ireland, 26 were to be independent, and 6 would remain as part of the United Kingdom and be known as Northern Ireland. These 6 counties were the most Protestant areas of the island, the place with the most success during the earlier plantation policies of England. As the majority of the new Northern Ireland were English-speaking Protestants who remained loyal to the United Kingdom, it was decided that they would not join the new Irish Free State. The treaty divided Ireland. A civil war broke out between Irish in support of the treaty and Irish against the treaty. Even today, we can still see evidence of this in the Republic of Ireland. The two major political parties began as pro-treaty and anti-treaty organizations. In 1937, Ireland became known as the Republic of Ireland, and they joined the European Economic Community in 1973. Ireland's traditions of emigration continued until the 1980s, with thousands of young Irish people moving to the UK, the USA, and Australia. However, in the 1990s, Ireland's economy became one of the fastest growing in the world. And although not as strong today as it once was, Ireland now has a reputation as a great place to live and visit. The division of Ireland also created Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom, but with their own organisation and parliament. Although Northern Ireland is majority Protestant, or was majority Protestant, there is a sizable number of Irish Catholics in the north who identify more with the Republic of Ireland. Northern Ireland was relatively stable until the 1960s, but this stability was based on discrimination against Catholics. The 1960s saw civil rights movements begin across the world, and the same is true in Northern Ireland. Catholics took to the streets demanding more rights and respect in the north. These protesters were met with violence from Protestants, and what followed is known as the Troubles. During the Troubles, nationalist or Republican, so usually Catholics, regularly clashed with loyalist and unionist groups, normally Protestants. The British military was sent to Northern Ireland in 1969 to calm the situation and protect the Catholic population. However, in reality, the army was seen as the enemy by the Catholics. And they had good reason to think this. In 1972, British troops opened fire on a Catholic march in the city of Derry, Londonderry, killing 13 people. Paramilitary organizations on both sides of the conflict were formed, and many atrocities, murders, bombings, and kidnappings were conducted by both sides. Attacks extended outside of Ireland, with bombings targeting British politicians in the UK. It is estimated that around 3,000 people were killed between 1969 and 1998 due to the Northern Irish Troubles. The Troubles are generally agreed to have ended on April 10, 1998, with the Good Friday Agreement. The agreement was approved by referendums in both Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and it established Northern Ireland's own parliament and government based on power sharing. Rather than fighting, the two sides would agree to work together in parliament to make decisions. And since the Good Friday Agreement, Northern Ireland has been significantly more stable and peaceful, although there are still occasional moments of violence. While I think it is unlikely that Northern Ireland will leave Britain anytime soon, Brexit has complicated things. Northern Ireland has now left the European Union, along with the rest of the UK, while the Republic of Ireland has stayed as a member. This goes completely against the idea of the Good Friday Agreement and the Irish peace treaties. The Good Friday Agreement aimed to reduce the differences between the two Irelands. For example, the borders were opened. To maintain the agreement, Britain and the EU negotiated something called the Irish Protocol. Basically, the border between the UK and Ireland was not with Northern Ireland, but in the Irish Sea. So this meant that goods and people could freely pass between Northern Ireland and Ireland, but not between Ireland and the rest of the UK. This has angered many unionist Northern Irish people. They feel as though the UK government has abandoned them across the Irish Sea and made it more difficult for Northern Irish businesses to keep operating in England, Scotland, and Wales. Although the government has begun to change the Irish Protocol, the issue will be present for many years to come. So, will Ireland and Northern Ireland ever unite again? I think it's possible one day, but not anytime soon. And the reason I think this is due to culture and religion. In the past, the division between Ireland and Northern Ireland was based on the division of Catholics and Protestants. However, as religious control and influence over the two societies changes and reduces, there should be less chance for division. Protestants are no longer a clear majority in Northern Ireland, and a lot of Northern Irish people don't identify with either Catholic or Protestant. And in the Republic of Ireland, the Catholic Church no longer holds tight control over the country. Irish education, culture, and politics have become much more secular and liberal. Ireland has passed lots of progressive policies, including legalizing gay marriage, something once unthinkable in a Catholic country. And finally, Brexit has damaged the integrity of the UK. Scotland and Northern Ireland were big supporters of remaining in the EU, but left along with the rest of the UK. The next few years and decades will challenge the integrity of the UK. If Scotland manages to leave, then Northern Ireland, and perhaps even Wales, may start to think about it as well. So here is today's final thought. On this episode of Thinking in English, I have tried to introduce the history of Ireland and help you all understand why the Emerald Isle is divided. England and then later the United Kingdom controlled or influenced Ireland for almost 1,000 years, and during that time discriminated against the native Catholic Irish people. Thousands of Protestant settlers moved to Ireland, especially in the northeast of the island. And after centuries of campaigning, fighting wars, and resisting the British, Ireland eventually became independent. But the mainly Protestant northern counties remained part of the UK and are now known as Northern Ireland. Do you think that in the future, Northern Ireland will leave the UK? Does your country have any controversial borders or territorial disputes? Let me know in the comments on Spotify, on the blog, or send me a message on Instagram, Thinking in English Podcast over on Instagram. And I do lots of different content over there. Please leave a like, a rating, a review wherever you are listening right now. We're trying to get to 2,000 reviews on Spotify, or 2,000 5-star reviews, please. And if you really love listening to the podcast, please consider subscribing to my Patreon. Patreon is a subscription platform where you can support your favorite podcasts. And in return, you can join our conversation club, you could get bonus episodes, and you could have one-on-one conversations with myself, and much more as well. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode and have a great day. I'll see you next time.